Our visit was brief, and with no common language we had great difficulty communicating. The months and months of waiting and the misery of the transit camp had taken a terrible toll. She was at the end of her rope. Captain Huchthausen and I spoke again, and more pressure was put on the authorities to speed up her case. It seemed to take forever. In the end, there was a happy ending, although I did not get to write it. The two people who did remember each other after all those years have written it themselves. Silvana Foa, spokesman for the Secretary-General of the United Nations. Chapter 1. The Village. Lung. The late evening breeze finally nudged away the day's heat and pushed the mosquitoes back to the marshes hidden deep in the Mekong Delta. It was the golden time of day, I thought, a time when everything was at its best. The oppressive heat and dust were gone, the irritation and discomfort cleansed by the breeze. The cool expanse of the nearby river eased my fears of distant guns, as darkness enveloped everything around me. I lay on my straw mat on a ledge in our thatch-covered home by a canal leading to the main river. My 5 brothers feared the night, but at age 10, I loved soft light and shadows. My name, Lung, means short. But in the dark, I was no longer smaller or weaker than my brothers. In the evenings, my voice rivaled theirs. I was not little, at least not in heart. The next day I would cover a long distance on the wonderful river. The flowing waters made me feel stronger and bolder by concealing my size. On the river I moved as fast as my brothers, steered a sampan as accurately as the others, and moved as nimbly as they between bobbing boats. I never fell in the water, unless I wanted to. I knew there was too much work to permit play, but I played secretly while we worked. I enjoyed picking the squash and gathering the garlic and tying up the bundles of greens for the market. When I carried fish sauce cans to the loading pier from the gigantic vat under the corrugated roof of the Nuc Mam building, I was carrying imaginary bricks to build my house. The fish and crab were my companions in the maze of canals connecting our village of Phu Duc with the other hamlets lining the broad Mekong. The river at that point is called Kulong, meaning 9 dragons, for the 9 separate channels which heave the river's gathered riches into the sea. Actually, there are only 8 channels, one silted up many years ago, but 9 is a preferred number to Vietnamese. The wealth of rich topsoil and fish are mixed with the residue of human suffering during the river's long meander from the Himalayas to the South China Sea. We grew to know that suffering firsthand. In the morning I would travel by water taxi from our village to the market in the grand town of My Tho. After tomorrow I would rival my older brother Cao, who made the trip often, by carrying my own load of fruit to sell and returning with the goods all sold, and a pocketful of dong to prove my success. I watched the glitter of stars through the gaps in the grass roof, confident I was as strong as my brothers, and maybe smarter. They did not know a thing about cooking or working inside our small home as I did, yet I could perform many of their chores with ease and grace. A wave of warmth surged through me, and I wondered why I felt so sure everything would be different after the next day's trip. I somehow knew it would be, just as I knew that dreams seen in succession often come true. It had happened to me before, after seeing the same dream 3 times. It was as unfailing as the sun, and as predictable as the river current. The river and sun were my special signs of safety and comfort. When guns sounded in the distance, then closer, the nearness of the river and the presence of the sun reduced my fears. The gun sounds had become more frequent, but were still seldom heard nearby. Once I heard rapid shooting from the river near the village. The noise frightened me, but that rarely happened in daylight. The clatter of shooting was always accompanied by a visit from the government's foot soldiers. Those miserable figures would sweep through the village and surrounding fields only in daytime, carrying weapons too heavy for their size. They seldom succeeded in finding or confronting the Viet Cong. In any case, it was wise to keep away from them. Sometimes traps or mines set by the Viet Cong exploded, horribly wounding the young South Vietnamese soldiers who walked with frightened eyes along the village paths and through the rice fields. The round metal hats the soldiers wore made them look ridiculous. They were much too large. The helmets often fell over their eyes, forcing the soldiers to hold their heads at absurd angles in order to see. When these men were nearby, it was good to keep chickens and ducks hidden to keep them alive. It was best, in all cases, to hide when the soldiers came through. The Viet Cong were different. They moved only at night and seemed to glide without noise. But it was dangerous, too, when they came. Life for the people in our village was a delicate balance between opposing forces. To live safely, we needed to tread gently. Like the river, the village balanced conflicting forces of affection and danger. Despite the fear and danger, I was happy. I hugged myself as I thought about tomorrow's trip. I would meet Cousin Din at the river station. We would travel together on the river, and its waters would protect us. Together Din and I were strong, like the heroic Trung sisters of early Vietnamese history. Together we imagined ourselves as fearless as Trung Truc and her sister Trung Nhi in ancient Vietnam, who had raised an army and led a campaign against the invading Chinese. The two victorious sisters had founded a kingdom. They were the first successful leaders in a long series of Vietnamese uprisings against the Chinese. That night my thoughts drifted off to the rice fields and embankments stretching out from the quiet village along the canal, past the fish stakes which looked like crooked fingers in the shallows. I imagined myself floating above the dark sampans bobbing empty along the banks and gently chafing against one another. I floated out to the Khu Long, where stars reflected their shimmering light on the black moving waters. The faint smell of Nuc Mam faded into the night breeze. The air was sweet, like the scent of a mango as it made a rhythmic brushing sound on the high grass along the edge of the village. Drifting near sleep, I was suddenly awakened as the sound of the wind in the grass was transformed into muffled footsteps. I listened as they came again, louder. The whispering breeze which had lulled me to sleep earlier now mingled with the sound of excited voices. I lay fully awake, but did not move. Not tonight, I thought. On my special night. I waited, trying not to breathe. Again, silence. Maybe it was my imagination. The quiet pressed in on me. Suddenly a rattle, more muffled steps, and stifled whispers. No, I thought. Please, not now. I wished the intruders would pass by. I raised my head and peered through a crack in the wall toward the center of the village. Darting flames split the darkness. Flickering lights moved at shoulder height. First one torch danced in the night, then several appeared, carried by ghost-like figures. I covered my ears at the sound of metal against metal. The steady beat woke the sleeping villagers. I put my ear against the wall and heard the chilling announcement that made my flesh tighten. Awaken, villagers. Gather to meet those who depend on your sustenance. I loathed these night visits. My chest tightened as I remembered the last visit several months ago. I knew the intruders expected us to file out of the house together, sit in a semicircle around the torches, and listen to the Viet Cong fables. It was too dangerous to resist. Mother said one should not tease an angry tiger or torment a wounded water buffalo. The Viet Cong were swift and vicious. I had heard the stories of villagers who defied the night cadres. An elder from a nearby village once had his head severed from his body in front of a similar night gathering. It had happened but months ago. Everyone knew about it, but tried to ignore the memory. I heard my mother stir. She called softly to wake my brother. I sat up and waited. Would I have to go? I still looked young enough to remain in bed. She came to the side of the straw mat, looked down at me quietly, and put her cold hand on my shoulder. My 3 younger brothers slept peacefully in the far corner of the hut. Come, Lung. You too must attend. They'll find you if you do not go. I rose in silence and pulled on my cotton smock, pleased in a way that I was considered important enough to go. Together the 3 of us filed quietly out of the hut and walked slowly to the center of the hamlet. We encountered the startled faces of